Good evening, and welcome to the Charles Koch Institute Forum, Education Opportunities, A Path Forward for Students in Tennessee. My name is Brennan Brown, Program Officer with the Charles Koch Foundation. We are excited to be in Nashville and welcome all of you and our viewers online. We are here this evening to explore expanding opportunities in education, especially for the most disadvantaged, and to learn about possible solutions from leading experts and practitioners. Nashville is an ideal place to have this important conversation. In fact, nearly 30% of Tennesseans have already called for education to be the state's top priority. Tennesseans realize the important link between education and opportunity. For example, nearly 500,000 young Americans annually are missing out on at least a high school equivalent education. Recent Tennessee data indicate 1 in 5 ninth graders don't go on to graduate. And according to one study, the lost lifetime earnings in Tennessee for that class of dropouts alone totals a staggering $6.5 billion. The statistics don't begin to tell the real, personal, and human stories of the tens of thousands of students who have been left behind and opportunities left unfulfilled by young men and women simply searching for a better future. The Charles Koch Institute is a nonprofit educational organization with more than 2,000 alumni. Our programs are focused on the importance of free societies and how they contribute to improving people's lives. Tonight's conversation is part of the Institute's Well-Being Initiative, a research-based project to foster the conversation about well-being and how people can improve their lives. The latest installment in this series of discussions into issues and ideas impacting societal well-being is education and opportunity. So tonight, together, we put students first and start a conversation about what can be done to improve education and expand opportunity. I am honored to welcome our panelists. First, Mrs. Stephanie Lynn. Stephanie is the State Programs and Government Relations Director for the Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice. Next, Mr. Jonathan Butcher. He is the Education Director at the Goldwater Institute. Next, Dr. Steve Perry. Dr. Perry is the principal and founder of Capital Preparatory Magnet Public School. And finally, Mr. Justin Owen. Justin is the president and CEO of the Beacon Center. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. Well, let's begin the conversation. Dr. Perry, to you first. U.S. News and World Report recognize Capital Prep as one of the nation's top public schools. In your experience as principal, who is most impacted by greater educational opportunity?
The people most impacted by access to quality education are the ones who have the least access. These are poor minority kids, in many cases rural families, who don't have access to a quality education. They're the ones whose lives are most changed by amazing academic experiences, and quite frankly, the ones most likely to go above and beyond to get it. What I mean by that, these are the same families that are writing someone else's address on a slip that enrolls them into a school system that they're not supposed to be in. Or this is the same family that's willing to say that in a desegregated school program that their families are white when they're not. These are the ones who are going to do whatever they have to do, get on a bus and go to a cousin in them's house and use that school bus to make it to the other school that they weren't supposed to be in, just so they can get access to a quality education. These people are willing to and are going to prison to steal a public education. It's absurd, but it's where we are now.
Justin, your work has centered around expanding options for students. How can increased educational opportunities help break that cycle of poverty?
Well, typically low-income families are the least likely to have choice options. If you're wealthy, you can afford private school tuition. If you're middle class, you can at least afford to move to a better school district. But families across the state who are low income, and there are a lot of them in Tennessee, don't have those same options. So we've worked to expand a myriad of options. I don't think at the Beacon Center, our job is not to pick one type of choice or another, or to prefer private schools over charter, over public, over online or homeschool. It's to give families the options that are best for their child. We know that every child is different, yet our education system is one size fits all. And choice breaks that mold by allowing families to tailor to the special needs of their individual children so that they can provide the best education possible regardless of their income and regardless of, frankly, where they're zoned to attend. I mean, right now a zip code determines where your child goes to school, and frankly, I think that is pathetic. I think we need to empower parents to make those choices and not some imaginary line or number.
And I think that's why we need all of the different choices, and they can take so many different shapes. In Arizona, for example, one of the most widely used forms of what we would consider to be school choice isn't even considered school choice by families anymore, because they can select a public school subject to space almost anywhere in the state. And we call it open enrollment. And there are at least 30 some states around the U.S. that have something similar. And so, families don't even consider that to be a remarkable decision anymore in our state. And it's great for them, right? They can find a public school, a traditional school that meets their needs. The trouble is that in, whether it's a reservation in Arizona or an urban area in, say Memphis or Chicago or someplace like that, you may need something that perhaps is fits the unique needs of those children, like Justin was describing, a little better. That may be a private school. It may be a private school and an online school in the afternoon. And so there are solutions that lead toward that today.
And I think today I see a couple people who are probably parents in the audience. And if you happen to be zoned, for a public school that happens not to be a right fit for your child, even the best public school might not be the right fit for your child. What options do you have at this point? Really, you have a couple. One, you could homeschool. Two, you could move into a different neighborhood, which is the way most people actually pay for their education. Or you could use private school or tutors. But most of those options really advantage children from wealthier families. And it's unfortunate that today, children who are from families who are lower income are severely disadvantaged, especially if they find themselves in a school that is not right for them. But I think today, one of the things that we're excited to talk about is the fact that that's changing. In a lot of states, actually, in fact, 300,000 students are using private school options to choose the school of their choice or the services of their choice. So that means that, in 22 states, if you're zoned for a school that's not working for you, you can actually use an education savings account, a voucher, a scholarship to pay for the school or services that best fits your kid.
So a couple of times already, we've heard that perhaps the zip code is not the optimal way as a way of moving students to schools. What is the optimal way, or what is the better way, if there is such?
Choice, very simply. We get to choose virtually everything in this country. That's one of the reasons why we like it here, because of the freedom to make certain decisions. We can choose what bologna we want or not, but we can't choose what school we want to send our children to. There's an absurdity to the notion that by virtue of the fact that you live in a community, that you have to go to that school, that somehow sentences you, in some cases, in many cases, to a lifetime of underperformance. And then what we do is we blame the people who attend the failed schools for not caring about education, when they're doing everything that they can imagine to get access to a quality education. Yet there are these not so imaginary lines that are keeping them in, hurting them like cattle. and saying to them, you can want to get out all you wish, but you're not going to get out. We're allowing a special interest, the teachers union in particular, to have almost carte blanche control over where all children go to school. Interesting as it is, they send their kids to schools that are not failed. Interesting as it is, they use school choice. See, when we talk about school choice, we need to have a broader conversation about what school choice really is. It's about you and your partner making a decision to either live in one community or not, either to save money or not, but to do something to put your child in the best possible situation and be successful. And here in a place like Tennessee, there's research out, and this is not about black kids or poor kids, this is about Tennesseans, that says 70% of 8th graders have already tested to be reading below grade level in this fair state. 50% of seniors in high school. So I think everybody in here might want to have a little conversation about school choice, because it's something that's meaningful, not just to the poor or the indigent or the minority, but to all of us who care enough about our children to want them to have access to a quality education.
And I think, like we were talking about before, the tradition of zip code assignment is, it's definitely past its time, right? And so what we can look forward to today, and we're already seeing across the country, is that not only people know what a voucher is, right? People know even what a charter school is largely in many areas, but we have the next generation really of these things to look forward to. Education savings accounts, for example, in Arizona and now Florida, allow families to use public money that would have otherwise been set aside in the public school system, and they can choose from a variety of services and schools for their children. It could be a private school, an online school, they could save for college, they could pay for college, all with one debit card, right? All with one account. So this is an exciting future, right? We can look forward to a day where you can say, look, I have a 10th grader, he's struggling in Spanish, he's having a hard time in math, but he's way ahead in English, right? So I'm going to allow him to take a class at a community college. We'll pay for it with the education savings account. We can use the ESA to get him some tutoring after school in math and Spanish, and so he can be, prepared for that unique circumstance of that child. And that's a very 21st century, right? We've done that with music and movies, right? Apple and iTunes have helped us with those things. And now we have it with education, right? With education, we have something that we can define what we need and then how we provide those services.
And that's the beauty of choice, is that it breeds innovation. It forces the system to constantly change and improve to the benefit of the children. And that's what we're trying to do, is to provide those myriad of options, whether it's ESAs or vouchers. We have already got a robust charter school program in our state, and their track record shows that it works. It provides those children with a quality education who, for whatever reason, weren't getting that education in their zoned public school. And it's not necessarily that the zoned public school is a bad school in every case, but it's a bad school for that individual child. And these types of choice allow parents to embrace the options and choose the one that is the best fit so that they can, their child can thrive.
And I think it's helpful to have this continued discussion about really the purpose of public education. Is the purpose of public education to fund the running of schools or to fund the education of the public kids? I mean, these programs are affecting real kids' lives, and there's a ton of research out there that shows that kids who are using these programs perform better academically, and they're better, honestly, overall in life is giving them a leg up. So I think this type of conversation is really helpful to really talk about not just school choice, but public education as a whole.
Well, I want to stay there for a second. When we talk about public education, very often we're cordoned off into this intellectual ghetto where we think that the only public education is the school at the end of your block. But that's not what this was designed for. It was designed to educate the public. That was just the technology of the day, building a school at the end of the block, so to speak. But as we've gotten things like cars and buses, we've been able to open up our minds around the notion of what public education really is. The purpose behind public education was to educate the public, not to keep a building open. When the building no longer meets the needs of the children, it's no longer a school. When people there are not learning, it's a school. It's not a school. It could be a bomb shelter. It could be a building. It could be a gymnasium. It could be a lot of things. You can call it a lot of things. You can't call it a school if 50 and 60% of the kids are dropping out. If 70% of the kids are not learning to read on grade level. It can't be called a school until it educates. And if the community, the public, the Americans, the people who want choice, don't get access to choice, then what are we sending as a message? Why then are we keeping these buildings open? We have to remember that all of us, on some level or another, actually have always supported vouchers. That's why it's surprising to me that in Tennessee you don't have a strong voucher program. You have a Republican governor, a supermajority of Republicans who typically fight for vouchers, and yet you don't have a voucher program. I'm confused.
Me too.
So, I mean, you say you're for it, you say you want choice, and then you don't pull the lever to make the choice happen. And so what then is it but lip service? See, I'm the guy who they bring not to talk to the people who aren't in the room, but the ones who are. I could talk about all the other groups, but they're not here. You're the ones who have the power to make the change that needs to be made right now. In cities such as Memphis, you have a third of your adults who are illiterate. I'm not prepared to accept that all those parents of those adults were just bad parents, but I will submit to you that they did go to ineffective schools. And imagine, you might have a cure for cancer in Memphis, but it may be caught in the mind of a person who doesn't have the confidence to raise his hand in the classroom. We don't know what we've lost. That's the point here. We don't know what we've already lost. It's not about black or white. It's about our community as a whole, our country as a whole. And so it's important that we understand we do support vouchers. You support financial aid. Some of y'all might have used it. Or not. Wrong room. Gotta know your audience. I'm gonna explain. There's this thing called financial aid when you have enough money to go to college. Brothers like me used it, and it made it possible for us to graduate. Tap your neighbor and ask them, they might know. Inevitably, we all, on some level or another, Medicaid, Medicare, you've seen voucher programs work. And they've worked across this country. Again, with a supermajority and a Republican governor and a commissioner who are all in support of this, I'm confused as to why Tennessee doesn't have one of the leading voucher programs in the nation. I'm just a little confused.
So talking about alternatives, if alternatives are so important, let's talk about the accountability measures associated with those alternatives. I mean, what about a bad charter school or a bad private school? Where's the accountability there?
Shut it down.
Mm-hmm. That's the great thing about the charter school system is that if a school is failing, it gets shut down. And when's the last time you heard of a traditional public school being shut down for poor performance? It just doesn't happen. And the same should be true for private schools. If they are not providing adequate services to those kids and educating them, the parents should flee. I mean, if you have a choice program, a private choice program, parents are going to hold that school accountable because they already got their kids out of a failing public school or one that wasn't serving the needs of their child. They'll do it again if the private school doesn't meet their demands. And at least the proposals we've talked about in Tennessee have stringent accountability requirements for private schools, and rightfully so, because we're talking about educating our children here, and we should demand the best. We should demand excellence, and I believe they can meet those demands, because if they don't, parents are going to exercise their choice to take their children out just like they put them in.
And really, parent accountability is one of the best forms of accountability. I mean, if a school isn't working well for your child, rather than fighting an administration or trying to move or just taking that whole on, you can simply just use a voucher, a scholarship, an education savings account, and go to a school that works best. And by all means, you're going to keep that school accountable to making sure that they're serving your child. We actually did a report that showed how and why parents actually choose some of these options. And academics was important, but it wasn't the top choice. I mean, a lot of these parents are just looking for a school that's safe for their child to learn. And in fact, you know, in many cases, school choice has been the opportunity for kids, in fact, kids who are being bullied, to escape a bad situation. I mean, there's actually a student in Oklahoma who was in that exact situation. She was being bullied. Her name's Felicia, and she was being bullied from the moment she got to school to the moment she got home. In fact, she would eat her lunch in the bathroom because people were calling her names, and she just didn't want to be a part of that. So for her family, her mom, accountability and quality meant pulling her out of that school and going to a school that works for her. And now she's doing very well, and actually her mom said that she has confidence, wakes up in the morning wanting to go to school, and can't wait to write in her English class because she wants to be an author. So to me, I think there's a lot of issues at play in the accountability discussion, and we should really take into account the holistic nature of a child's education.
Because we've certainly had achievement data for years and years, right? I mean, we've had the U.S. Department of Education has a national report card that we have data going back to the 70s. The SAT and the ACT have been used as college entrance exams for time out of mind, and we can use indicators like that to tell us which schools are doing well, which schools are not doing well, where students are prepared for whatever their next step is and which ones aren't. And I think that's what school choice brings, and a lot of what Stephanie was describing is that for the first time, parents can decide, not just about test scores, although it's important, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't know to shut down a charter school, right? Or a traditional public school. Instead, you have parents that say, hey, look, my child has mild cerebral palsy and mild autism, and they need these specific services. I need a school that's going to provide X, Y, and Z to help them over here. My child is way advanced. They're in 6th grade, but they read at a 12th grade level. I want them to be prepared for, MIT, right? That's where they're going to go. And there's no way, and we've tried, believe me, we've tried, but so far we have not been able to construct a single public school system that can provide all those services in one place for every child, no matter what shape, color, level of achievement or wherever they are, right? We've expected them to do so. We've expected public schools to be the one place where a child can go and get everything they need, and it just hasn't worked, right? Instead, they absorb money, and then we stand back and look for the results, and all we see is that we've paid a lot, right, for something that has, kind of missed our expectations. And that's what choice brings, right? It allows for parents to say, I'm going to go over here because my child needs this over here.
At a lower cost, too. I mean, we're working on a study right now at the Beacon Center looking at the fiscal impact of voucher programs like the one proposed by our governor. And private schools traditionally can educate a child at a lower cost than public schools. Therefore, only a portion of that funding would follow the child. A portion of it would remain in the public school system, not only to cover their fixed cost that they claim, if this child's leaving, we still have cost. Well, we'll give them that. Even a liberal understanding of fixed costs will allow them to cover those costs, plus another $1,500 or so per child on average across the state to be reinvested back in those public schools, raising per pupil funding. So this is a rising tide that lifts all boats. It's not just about helping the kids that leave the public schools. It's about helping the kids that remain, too.
There are a couple myths that you often hear bandied about education and public education and resources, and you talked a little bit about them. You'll hear that the charter schools are taking money away from the traditional schools. You'll hear that the vouchers are closing down and bankrupting these schools. If money spent were an indication of a school or program's effectiveness, then we should send all of our children to prison, because that's where we spend the most amount of money. But it doesn't yield the greatest result, not in terms of performance. And in fact, if you go to some of the lowest performing schools in this country, you'll see they are the most expensive. The most expensive. Not just because you get so little bang for your buck, but dollar for dollar, they just cost more because they have additional people who work in the building doing additional things, none of which move the academic experience forward at all. So it's imperative that we understand that it's not about how much we spend, it's how effectively we spend the money. And we can measure that. There are recent studies that talk quite a bit about just that, about the quality of education and the amount of money spent. Money does matter at some point, let's be clear. No one wants to pay more taxes. And the only place we're getting the money from, it's not this imaginary place in the sky where we just have the money fall down. It comes from us. And we should expect that when we send a child to school and they are in the 3rd grade, that they should be able to read like a 3rd grader. I know it's a shocking concept that a 3rd grader should read at 3rd grade level, and that is not amazing. We should expect that. When we pay people to teach our children, they should be taught. And when you hear people holding parents accountable, the parents are the first teacher, okay, homie, I get it. I'm the first one. But then who are the rest of them? Am I supposed to teach them chemistry too? Algebra too? Am I supposed to do all these things? Then what are we paying you for? We should expect our schools to be able to teach specific skills. And those skills should present themselves when assessments are done. It's not about the money in terms of how much we spend on schools, as well as the money of the children. You often hear people say, well, poverty is the reason why these children are performing poorly. Really? So poor kids are dumb? Nah, you don't really believe that. It's not poverty. Well, what about the parents' education? Well, if that was the case, then at the feet of liberty, where it says very clearly, bring us your tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free, they should say also, but don't drop them off in one of our schools unless you have 2 parents with them. It doesn't make sense, and it's anti-American. We expect, Dr. King himself said, that public schools should be so good at what they do that you cannot tell who the parents are. That's what a school should do. That's what schools do. They enlighten and brighten us. You hear the term brighten, to be bright, to enlighten, to bring light to make smarter. That's what schools are supposed to do. And when they are not doing that, they're not serving the public good, and as a result, hurt us badly.
And there's anecdotal evidence of this too. You talk about minorities, single mothers, poor people. These are the ones we don't expect to succeed. There's a private opportunity scholarship program in Memphis called the Memphis Opportunity Scholarship Trust. And I had the opportunity to meet a young gentleman who's been in the program since pre-kindergarten. He's now entering into high school. He is in Orange Mound, which is one of the most dangerous dangerous neighborhoods, not only in Memphis, but in the entire country. You would think that he has no chance at success. But because he was given an opportunity, he's in a poor neighborhood, he's African American, he's got a single mother because his father passed away when he was a baby. He is excelling because he was given that opportunity. And another thing we hear is, well, we got to keep community schools, because if we don't, then there's no sense of community and people will flee those communities. He's been given an opportunity to go to a private school, an elite private school, now for his entire educational career. And has he fled Orange Mound, the most dangerous community in Memphis? He's not only not fled, he's reinvesting in it himself. At 12 years old, Marshall Shanks, he went to the Memphis City Council and presented a plan called One Block at a Time, started a nonprofit, and worked with the City Council to revitalize the neighborhood block by block to bring people back into the community that he loved. So given an opportunity to get out, he went back in. And that's a powerful story from someone who had all the factors checked off against them and was told you cannot succeed. He's succeeding better than most people who are wealthy, white, living in great neighborhoods and suburban areas, because he was given an opportunity that unfortunately many and almost all of his peers were not given.
Dr. Perry, on that point of students, being student-focused, you'd mentioned a story earlier about what really toughens up your students and helps them connect education to opportunity. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Which story?
Yeah, the one about the knowing the neighborhood from which the students came really provides a framework for how tough they need to be in order to succeed.
It's, you know, I actually believe that if a child can drag herself out of bed in a home where there's no one to awaken her and make her way through some of America's most dangerous real estate and carve anything remotely close to an education out of a school in which only 2 8th graders can read at grade level out of a class of 80. I just don't understand. Like, when I say those things, even for me, it stops me. That it's stunning that we just accept that all the people in that school are going to get to keep their job. That you have that level of fail, and everybody's going back to work tomorrow. Sorry, I digress. That if she can carve something remotely close to an education out of the experiences that she has, and that's a special little girl. Imagine, if you will, if she were given access to a quality education, really. A place where she could learn safely. And safe isn't always, we talked about safety. I want to take safety and I want to break it down quickly. Safety isn't just worrying about getting shot. Let's just take that off the table. Safety is feeling comfortable raising your hand to answer a question and not being called a name. Safety is being able to walk down a hall and have people greet you politely. Safety is feeling loved and respected. Safety is knowing that when you call upon a teacher for extra help, she'll stay after. See, safety is broader than we typically think about it. This almost myopic way that we think about it as almost a war zone. That's not everybody's reality. Safety is the feeling of love. That's what it really is. And if you go to any school, you can go to any primary school and find all the little kindergartners, and you can ask them, no matter what color they are, how many of you want to go to college? Watch and see how many hands raise high, even if they don't know what college is, no matter what color they are. And then I want you to stay in those communities where people are poor and minority and ask that question in every grade and watch how the hands start to drop or never go up. That's unsafe. When you can't even dream, when you wake up to a nightmare, that's unsafe. No one in this country should ever be forced to spend 1 minute in that unsafe setting. That's safety. When you walk into that building, you feel like, wow, something could really happen really fast here, and I need to get out of here. Imagine being 8 and having nowhere else to go. We owe it to ourselves as a country and community to do better than this. One of the things we know is we know how to run good schools. We really do. If we want to study something, we should study whether water is wet or fire is hot. This one is a give me. We know that good schools have quality instruction going on, and you can measure that. We know that they have strong leaders, and you can measure that. We know there's a climate in the building that you can also measure. And then, of course, there are results. Safety is greater than just your physical safety. It's the safety for a child. We're talking about kids here. All of you have kids in your life somewhere. When a kid can't dream of what they want to be when they grow up, that's the real carnage of a failed school. And there is no measure of that.
So, mentioned earlier was being focused on controlling costs, and I think we'd all agree that's important. But does providing more parental choice in education result in a lack of diversity in the classroom? Are there trade-offs that parents would make?
Well, actually, the research shows that students who use school choice, scholarships, vouchers, end up in more diverse classrooms at the classroom level. So in fact, this is actually one way to bring diversity. If you think about it, our residential zones, the way that we were talking about that earlier, oftentimes, sadly, are segregated because people just tend to live among people like themselves. So it's no wonder sometimes our public schools reflect that. School choice is a way for people to go to schools with a different set of people from their own community.
And there's specific examples of this too.
Yeah.
In Louisiana, which has a very large voucher program, the voucher program there did not increase the segregation in what was already, largely minority communities. Research on charter schools in particular has found that charter schools do not increase segregation. In fact, they lead to more desegregated schools. And I think that speaks to changing the who is being compelled to do what, right? Because when you have the traditional system that we're used to, the parents have no choice and they are compelled to send their children to one place, right? When you have, even if it's two or three choices, right, whether it's a public school choice as well as some sort of private school choice, it kind of turns that around, right? Parents suddenly, they don't have to take their child out of the public school if they don't want to. If they're happy there and they're satisfied, that's fine, and more power to them, right? But if they're not, why then they can. And they can go and find the best place that will serve their child's unique needs.
One more question on potential solutions. Generally speaking, K-12 reform takes shape in one of three buckets: more rules, more resources, or better incentives. Which bucket do you feel is most important and why?
Well, I think the research is pretty clear, at least from our standpoint. Our foundation would, we've done a literature review basically on what works for academic outcomes. And really, parental choice is a great incentive structure to give people the option of going where it works for them. For instance, some of the top quality studies that are coming out of Harvard, NYU, Stanford, show that kids who are using these programs perform better academically. And there's no study that's ever shown that kids were harmed. So what does that look like? Well, that means kids who are using these programs perform better or have better gains in math and reading compared to their peers. And kids who are using this are more likely to graduate from high school, enroll in college, and actually persist in college. And there's actually a Harvard Brookings Institution study that just came out that found that students who use school choice vouchers or scholarships, particularly African American students, were 24% more likely to go to college. I mean, I don't know what other type of reform you can get 24% more people to go to college. So in my estimation, it would be incentive, change the incentive structure.
Well, and I think that what we need to be aware of, even beyond funding and choice, is what's happening in Washington, D.C. And I think what's happened, especially in the past, and this current administration and even previous, as you watch No Child Left Behind be put on the shelf, and now we have other sort of contingent grants that are being issued from Washington, D.C., suddenly schools have all sorts of new rules that they have to comply with that they didn't have to comply with before. And we're seeing this new tide of regulation where schools are being forced to keep track of every single class and teacher their student has ever had. They're forced to, obviously there's the Common Core standards, which have changed now teaching and what's happening in classrooms. And so no matter where you stand on that, we have to be realistic about what is being forced from inside the Beltway when education is a state concern, right? All 50 states have their own constitutions. It is up to the states to decide what should be happening with what's going on in schools. And then, of course, beyond that, parents should be empowered to make choices. But it's critical for us going forward to really be aware of what Washington is laying down on us, and we need to not be satisfied with the types of regulations that are following.
I want to follow up with the with the school choice. I want to break down why I believe that school choice works. It's not because of the quality of the parents who are making the choice. It's because of the fit that the parents can make of the choice. Meaning that if you have multiple children or if you have multiple grandchildren, they're different. And finding the right academic setting for them is what's most important. So our school is a year-round school, a legit year-round school, not just we go to school during the summer, but it's a full 180 days. No, we're 201-day school year. We're in our third week of school. So I'm a public school principal. That means I had to write one of those little slips that I wasn't going to be here, and I'm sure there's somebody making sure online or otherwise that I'm not where I said I wasn't going to be. The life of a public school principal. So there are families for whom a year-round college preparatory education is just not what they want. It's what we have, though. And so when they come to our school and they go to school during the summer, for some of them, it's just not for them. Their family comes down south for the summer. They have family reunions or AAU tournaments. They just want something different. That's not a bad thing. It's just different. But for the 4,200 families who applied to Capital Prep this year, for the 100 seats that we have available, it is for them. It is for them. Because they know what we offer. They get it. They get that their kids are going to wear a blazer on July 7th and a tie. And that's not negotiable. That we're going to make sure that they have a black belt on, not a brown belt or a gray belt. And that their socks are going to matter, the color of them are going to matter. And whether they have a crest on their shirt, all those things that matter at our school. For some people, a parent said to me one time, y'all got too many rules. No, we have too many rules for you. We have all the rules that we need. But that's the joy, and that's how choice works. See, we have a theme of social justice. Other families want their kids to go to a classical magnet school, or some of them want them to go to an arts magnet school, and that's all fantastic. That's how choice works. That's why 24% more go. That's why we have a 97% daily attendance at a 201-day school year in a community that had up until that its highest graduation rate to date is 49% for the city of Hartford, 49%. We, at our little school, 700 kids, pre-K to 12, have an average daily attendance over 97% because the families who pick our school pick the school that's best for them. That's why school choice works. And when you look at it for what it really is, it's not because one parent is better than the other, because those parents who send their kids to our school typically have multiple children and their other kids don't go to our school. And it's Sophie's choice. Because so many of those family members have to deal with the fact that one kid is getting a quality, solid education and the other one is not. And they didn't do anything wrong but be born into the wrong community, not have enough money to move to a wealthier community, and lose a lottery. In this country, that can never be the determinant of your future. Whether you, just think of how cruel that is. That a parent has to decide. She has 2 sons, and one got in and one did not. Does she say neither goes? Or does she let one go and he's going to have a profoundly different academic and life experience than the other? There are so many stories that I hear of families where the one child gets into the school and the other one doesn't, and even if the other kid is younger, the one who goes to the better school is so much more advanced that she finds himself tutoring the other child. This ain't America. That's not what we signed up for. We have to be better than this. We have to open up enough seats for the people who deserve them, which are the children who have sought nothing more than a quality education. That's how choice works, and that's why we need to fight for more school choice.
Going back to the bucket situation, I think the problem with our existing quote-unquote reforms is that they all start within one of those 3 buckets, and it's really hard to lift a bucket standing in it. And I think the true reform that we need to look at is outside-in reform, reform that puts pressure on the system to change for the better for each individual child. And choice is the best way to do that. It does it far better than any other reform we've ever talked about. And I think it's because it starts outside of the buckets rather than in those traditional approaches that we've tried and failed time again.
And even within that, I mean, I think school choice has, it's matured beyond what we thought was going to help students before. I mean, it's great that we have programs that allow children and families to choose schools, such as yours, and private schools, and that's great. But we have more today, right? We have, between online options and education savings accounts, we have a whole new set of opportunities that can shape a whole learning experience, right? It doesn't just have to be about school choice, right? It can be about learning, right? And learning for the next generation of children and families.
Jonathan, let's stay there for a moment. You wrote a report, A Vision for Education, and in a world of increasing technological development, what is the future of learning as you see it?
And it's just that, right? Before we talked about, well, let's pick a good school as opposed to a bad school. We don't have to worry about that anymore, right? You can sit at your dinner table and you can say, okay, we can do half a day at this great charter school that's right up the street. And then I want this excellent math teacher that's at the local school. I've known him for 15 years. As a parent, went to school with him when I was little, right? And the child can spend part of the day there and then come home and take classes online, right? If it's a child that has special needs, right, like we were describing before, you can go and find a school that will help them. There are schools in Arizona and around the country today that have hybrid classrooms, right, where a child can go in and they'll work at their own pace on their school material for part of the day and then meet with a teacher and work with their classmates for the other part of the day, right? So we have a whole new design, right, a whole new thought of what learning means and what it looks like. And that's important because it's going to change when they get to college and then even beyond, right? We don't know what the labor market's going to look like in 5 years. It's very hard to predict things like that, right? We're not very good at making predictions, especially about the future. So we need to prepare families and their students, obviously, to be able to make choices between all of these different things, whether it's online or in a classroom or some combination of them.
You know, one of the things that we do know, right, because we can't predict the future, but we can see what's happening now. The rest of the world is using online education, and they're using our online education, just in case you missed it. They're using some of our best teachers to teach their children. See, they can't build $50 million failed schools. They just can't do that in many countries. And they can't drop $100 million on a gigantic facility, spend $20 million on a football field, and have kids who can't read the word football. They can't do that, right? So what they have to do is they have to get an education where they can. And the places that they can are online. And they're using those same online tools that we're passing up to beat us. It's really interesting. We talk about poverty. Most of the countries that are outperforming us are poorer than us, for now. Not forever, but for now. In China, for instance, one of the things that they've done is they've decreased the importance of English on their standardized examination. If that's not a hint for you, that's not a tap on the shoulder that we're about to really pass you now, you're not paying attention. Online education is not a panacea. There is no single panacea. But to be able to put together an a la carte academic experience, given what we know about learning, is the only way that we can do it. I have a son who's just turned 9 and a son who's 11. Both of them attend my school. So I get to do things in the principal's office that I've always wanted to do to your kids. So they're into Netflix, and strange as it is, they actually like watching old television shows, so they wanted to watch Leave It to Beaver. So there I am, right? Netflix, 11-year-old, 9-year-old watching The Beaver. And one of the things that I saw when I watched Leave It to Beaver, right, was that school in 1954 was the same exact school that we're sending our children to today. Except for the fact that that school had a mom who was at home with the pearls when she wanted to come out, who could manage that child's academic experiences. That is not the case anymore. What we need is not a Beav school. We need a whole different academic experience, one that takes into consideration all that we know about learning. And what we know about learning is that anytime one of our children want to know something, they just Google it. They're not afraid of technology like we seem to be. They're not afraid of it. See, we talk about the achievement gap, but let me just point this out to you. You take an iPhone, or any Droid or whatever technology, which is the most advanced technology, more technology than they use to send a man to the moon, and you put that in the hand of a poor kid, minority kid, and you take that same technology, you put it in a kid's hand who's wealthy and white. And I want you to show me the achievement gap. There is none. They've been given equal access. When you give them equal access, they perform the same. The data keeps saying that. It keeps saying that. It says that when you randomly select children for advanced placement courses, their performance is the same. It's the same. We know that depending upon where you come from, the only difference is where you go to school. That's it. So if we can level the playing field by bringing the greatest instructors to bear on the issues in the places where they have the least amount of access to quality education, then we can make it the same.
And in states like Louisiana and even Wisconsin and Minnesota has a similar program, they have taken all of the available courses and put them in a database. And parents can go online, you can put in your zip code and the course that you're looking for, and then you can go and find that class. And so that access is now, it's being brought to families that didn't have it before. And it provides for the first time, you really can pick the course that you want. And it's critical because classes like advanced placement classes and interbaccalaureate classes and things like that, some of the highest available material that we have today is really not available to the majority of kids. In fact, it's really only about a third that have easy access to that type of material. And so that's why course choice, education savings accounts, and a combination of those things can really provide for that first time access to that those materials.
Right, and in addition to preparing kids for success in school, the workforce, and everything that's really required in the 21st century, I mean, a lot of this customized education through school choice is allowing kids not only to be prepared for that, but to actually succeed today. So for instance, I mean, there's a number of stories, but one that just comes to mind is Nathan, who's in Arizona, who's using an ESA. He receives therapy services. He receives other services to help his education. This was a kid who was nonverbal before he used the program. He is now talking with his mom and enjoying those conversations. I mean, his father even said this was a lifeline for him. So not only is this an opportunity to give kids who could really succeed in the 21st century a chance, it's giving kids who aren't even talking a chance to improve as well.
And it's not only a way to level the playing field between different income levels, but between rural and urban. I mean, you think about in Tennessee, we've got a lot of rural schools. If you want to take a French class and you live in a very rural town, you probably aren't going to be able to do that. But with online learning, all of a sudden you can be in that school most of the day while still having the same opportunities that someone in an urban area with more resources to those types of material would have. And so it really levels the playing field between the rural and urban as well.
Well, now I think for the most exciting part of the time we have together, we turn to you for questions of our panelists. And we have someone walking around who can put a microphone or hand you a microphone to ask your question. The only thing we ask is that you simply state your name and your affiliation, and we're happy to take questions.
Hello, my name is Bill Fitzhugh. I'm with Americans United for Separation of Church and State. And the main thing I'm wondering about is some of these great ideas that you're coming up with, why not simply, like the charter school that you represent is a public school, is my understanding. Why not simply, instead of taking money from the public school system, make the public school systems better? In Tennessee, for instance, schools are funded by property taxes. So you have the wealthy communities with good schools, and you have the poor communities with lousy schools. So I think one of the things that a lot of us are concerned about is depleting the original funding for the public school system. Some of these ideas, the online education, great idea. I don't know why we can't do it in a public school. So basically just making sure that some of these ideas that we have, and I understand that there's some issues with, I know you don't like teachers unions, but there's some issues that you might have with some of the established part of the schools. But I know you compare to Memphis, say, compared to Finland, where the private schools are completely, there are no private schools, and yet the academic level is much higher than it is anywhere in the United States. I mean, charter schools tend to have, my understanding is that they have about the same success academic failure rate as public schools of the students. Well, yeah, studies that I've read that aren't from the Koch Institute say that. So basically, just to find what the
I want to
problem
answer
would be from
one of
taking
your
that money.
questions, though, at some point. So, okay?
First, why does it matter whether it's a public or a private provider as long as it's providing that child with a quality education? That's what we should be concerned about, not the system. We hear a lot about the systems, the schools, the buildings, the money. Let's talk about what's best for the individual child. And if it's public, if it's private, then so be it. That's what's best for that child.
I think it's also important to answer the question with the question, why hasn't this happened? What's stopping those schools? We've been feeding those schools our children for generations, and they haven't done it. I'm not prepared to do any more experimenting. It's now time for me. These kids have awakened to the opportunities that should be before them. We need to stop making excuses and stop trying to find scapegoats and make sure that everything that we've said, every great idea that we brought forward is available. There's nothing and no one stopping anyone in those schools from doing it except them. So when we have the conversation, for instance, about the studies around the difference between charters and traditional schools, I'm a pro-choice advocate. I fight for school choice, not charters or magnets, but choice. That's what you've heard me discuss. However, if we read the study that wasn't produced by Koch, even if it was, but that doesn't change the veracity of it, it says that among wealthy families that there isn't much difference. But when you take children from historically disadvantaged populations, specifically blacks and Latinos, that they actually outperform their students from the neighborhood schools. So when we read the whole study, there's a big old section in the middle that says that the performance, this is the Stanford study that's often quoted, because I read the whole thing. So what it says is that for special populations, the ones for whom we need the most support, they actually work. And you just heard a 24% increase in college-going rates. So again, one, to your question, why haven't they? Great question. They've only had 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years to try some of these things.
I think if your question, if I'm understanding your question, it's why focus on this other reform when we could improve the public schools? Well, I think you can do both and, first of all, and then secondly, you know, the most studied educational reform happens to be the effect of school choice programs on public school students. And all of the research shows that students who remain behind in public schools actually perform better academically. So if the concern isn't really about, the concern about money is really the concern about, are kids going to benefit academically or be disadvantaged? That answer is very crystal clear. Kids who remain behind actually perform better academically.
All right, let me see if I can get my question out because my mind is kind of boggled to be right now. Whew, Mr. Perry, Dr. Perry. Wow. My question is the question I always ask to reformers. And the question is, we talk about the individual child, the individual child, the individual child. If you look at the history of public education and why it became a focus for this country, is because the effect it has on our society. So when you say that our schools don't matter in what shape, form, how they look, that's not true. Because how our schools look and the way we educate our children plays out as they graduate and become adults, and they're no longer the child that we are focusing on. They are the adult that is participating in society and giving back to society. So my question is, first of all, twofold is one, what is the end game here? What is the end game? What are we looking for? Are you looking to destroy the public system that we already have and build a new one based on your ideals? Because reform candidates don't win elections. Look across the country, they don't win elections. Here and there they might pick up one, but they don't win elections. So the public has shown they don't want a new public system. The last thing I'll leave before I let you answer what the end game is I'll give you what choice means to me and my community. I live in South Nashville, and by the way, here in Nashville, we do have choice. I can send my kid to any school in the state. So you're wrong when you come to my state and say we don't have choice in the public system. We do have choice. But what you're doing is, I live in South Nashville, an area that is 97% FRL. It's made up of people from over 67 different countries. I put my children there because it'll shape who they're going to be as adults. They're going to learn more than just reading and writing. They're going to learn how to navigate this world. But charters are proliferating in there. And charters are coming in and taking the parents who can contribute to those schools. They're taking the families that can actually make these schools stronger.
I know, I want to hear your question.
Wait a minute,
I'm
sir.
interested
I
in
listened to
hearing
you
it.
for 45 minutes. You can wait for me
That's
for a
what you
second.
were here to do.
But listen, one second, and then I'm done. I'm serious,
Okay.
I'm done. But taking those resources out, you're limiting my choice. Because my choice was reduced to either going to private school, or it's going to a charter school, or it's going to a public school that now is predominantly focused on EL and special ed children.
Okay.
So my question is, what is the end game?
I heard the question. Let me give you a couple things. First of all, at least 80% of the residents of Tennessee go to a public school.
Now.
Second of all, we've heard reports that as many as 70% of your ninth graders, 8th and 9th graders, are reading below grade level. As many as 50% of your seniors are reading below grade level. If charter schools are proliferating, it's because the people, the public, who you said didn't want them, do. So they are voting with their feet. These families don't want you to tell them where to send their kids to school. They want to make the choice for themselves. They have the capacity, the intellect, and the will. And when given the opportunity, they make that decision. It's not for me to decide or for you, sir. It's for us to allow the community to decide what a public education looks like today for them. And so for me, the end game is what the beginning game should have been. Educate the kids, not keep grown people employed. It's to make sure that the kids are first, second, and third. And as long as they are first, second, and third, then we will be the country that we always should have been. And if, for instance, we were to take my ideas, which seem to have caused you some consternation, then what you'd have is a school in which 100% of graduates go on to four-year colleges. If that's the worst thing that happened in your community, I think you'd have yourself a solid school.
My name is Erica Trevino, and I'm a parent of 2 children who are sitting right here. I want to tell you what school choice means to me. My 9-year-old son is autistic. He was barely on the spectrum when he started first grade, and that teacher, who was extremely abusive towards him, took him to being nonverbal. He went from being completely high functioning to barely functioning. That's what school choice means to me. That teacher still has her job because she's a tenured union teacher. She should never be around children ever. Okay? That's what school choice means to me. My son is now in an online virtual public school academy, and he is extremely high functioning again. I have pulled him out from being nonverbal to back to being verbal. And that is something that school choice means to me. And that is something that I fight for on a daily basis. I fought with that school to the point of getting my senator and my representative for the state of Tennessee, as well as the federal, state, and representative. They got me as much help as they could, and that school would not change. So I had to pull them out. And that is a very good success story sitting right here in this room. Every parent deserves choice. I have friends who send their children to that same school, and they have a great success rate there, and there is no harm to that school at all by pulling my 2 children out. I think every parent deserves a choice. I was public school educated, okay? I also have a degree in college, but that was something that I was given the choice of doing. My children deserve that same choice. And as a parent, I couldn't sit there and watch them do that to my kid.
I think I came to the wrong place because my name is Dixie Lee McClellan, because I came here knowing what you were talking about, because I've been doing this research on my own for the last 3 to 4 years. I am a retired public school teacher from Williamson County, and that's the premier system in this area. And I have seen the problems that we're all talking about here. And it may turn out, because my personal odyssey has been to fight Common Core, and I've been doing it at the legislature for the past 2 years. It may be that Common Core is the greatest gift, or will be the greatest gift to American education, because this is what it's, this is where we're turning now, because we can no longer hide from the fact that our public schools are simply not doing the job, and I'm from one of the best. Okay? I taught for over 30 years. I have worked on the federal level, the state level, and the local level on educational projects of various descriptions, which is another way of saying I'm an old lady. I'm 73. If you want me to take a seat up there and tell you what these folks are telling you, and you're saying, well, they don't really know because they're here, I can tell you that I have been there and I have done that. And my concern, it was first, as I said, Common Core. And what bothers me about everything that you've said so far is that it's important to have access to IB programs and the upper level academic I hope not. Have you seen the material that they're providing in those classrooms now? Do you realize what's happening to the perversion, in my opinion, of the way that we have taught social studies, history, government, English, the English language? All of these courses are being inundated now by techniques and ideas bolstered by Common Core that I have real problems with. So what I'm wanting to do is I want to see somebody after this is over. I've read Glenn, is anybody here familiar with Glenn Reynolds? Well, I've been reading him, and what you're talking about is something, and he's from the University of Tennessee in the law school, that's right. What I'm interested in hearing from somebody is how I can help bring the attention to the representatives on the Hill and work on legislation with them. So to let me know if I can be of help.
I mean, I would just say there are two things that are key, right? And one is all of the different educational options that we've been talking about. It's why they're so important. So like or hate the Common Core, wherever you stand, if parents can choose to leave whatever it is that their child is being taught, then then they'll have the choice to do it. And that's why all of these options, especially among private schools, charter schools, traditional schools, that's why all of those are so important. I would just add, secondly, charter schools and magnet schools in particular, they were created so that they could have unique missions, so that they could choose the educational delivery system that they wanted, right? And this was really important. They've succeeded at this for 25 some years now, okay? And so, and this is why I brought up the federal regulations that are coming down the pike these days, is that we need to be conscious about how that is affecting these schools. And I would just urge, everyone, in particular those that are working and running these schools and sending their children to these schools, that we need to make sure that the freedom and the autonomy that they had from the beginning remains. And whether that's from autonomy from the Common Core, from whatever it is, I think that is important, because without that, I think you lose the important unique approach to teaching and learning that those schools have brought. So we need to make sure that is preserved.
We're running out of time, so we'll just have a few moments to take a couple short statements of your question, and then we'll allow the panel to respond to all of those. So if you could just be brief, one sentence.
Brief? Those of you who talked to me about charter schools, there was a Vanderbilt professor, Diana Ravitch, who moved from Vanderbilt to New York University and has done a thorough, long-term study of charter schools. And if you want to contact her at New York University, she will furnish you, and it's also other places that you educated folks will know about. And I would suggest, I'm just focusing on charter schools because it's come up several times in your choice concern.
Thanks. You could just state your question quickly.
Yeah, I actually have a question. Yes, I've been a big fan of vouchers for a long time, and I know a lot of people in the school reform movement. My name's Steve Ezel. I'm just a business person, and I see some reaction against vouchers, in particular against people otherwise who are aggressive reformers. And intellectually, can you fill us in on some of their arguments why they may resist them?
Why they would resist vouchers?
Resist vouchers,
in particular?
otherwise strong reformers, but have some hesitancy about vouchers.
Oh, you mean the difference between vouchers and, say, tax credit scholarships?
No. I think what he's saying is that there are some people on the reform side, Steve, who don't say voucher. It's simple, because they don't want to be on the wrong side, so they're like reform light. So what they want to do is they want to be able to say what is most politically palatable and not call a voucher a voucher. Some people have asked me to call it money follows the child. I told them to kick rocks. It's a voucher.
A quick question from someone who is following the conversation online and has tweeted this. Amanda Brown would like a common definition for failing schools. Is it based on a state test score? But some clarification on what a failing school means to the panel.
There are a bunch of things. Of course, state tests matter. It's interesting. I find that some people say they're against tests, but they're for certification programs to become a teacher, which require tests. So you're against tests when they count against you, but you're not. I'm getting confused there. So I don't believe that the state tests tell you everything, much like I don't believe a scale will tell you whether or not you're pretty or nice, but it will tell you to put down a burger. The tests give you some insight into what the children can and cannot do. And to overlook the results simply because we don't agree with them in their totality is absurd. So a failing school is a school in which the majority of the children over a period of time consistently fail in the areas what we consider quality indicators. Daily attendance, graduation rates if it's a high school, overall student performance in the classroom, culture and climate, all of which can and are typically measured. And quite frankly, if those things don't matter, then ask yourself the question, do you send your child to that school? Would you send your child to that school? Do the teachers who work in that school send their children to those schools? If the real indicators, the real data points don't work for you, Just look around and see how many grown people get paid to work there, send their kids there. One way or another, between those, you will figure out whether or not that's a failing school.
And actually, if I may, ma'am, what is your name again? Erica. So regardless of whether her school was failing or not, it was failing her kid. I think bottom line, that's what a failing school is. No, thank you.
This will be our final question.
I want to thank the panel for a very, very enlightening conversation. My question for you all is, you've talked about a lot of things that need to be changed. What are the biggest obstacles to having a competitive educational environment for our children where they can actually choose? What are the biggest obstacles?
Honestly, in terms of we do national polling, I would say the biggest obstacle is just a lack of information of the choices that are already out there. If people knew that these programs were within their grasp, they would be knocking down doors. I think we also do, some, going back to whether or not you use voucher or not, when people understand what that actually means, the majority of people are in favor of vouchers, in favor of other school choice programs as well. I think really it comes down to a lack of information, and that's why dialogue like this is so important.
Excellent. Well, thank the panelists, please, for their time and their participation. Most importantly, thank all of you for being here with us to have this important conversation about the important link between opportunity and education, and also thanks to all the viewers online. We'd like to invite all of you next door to enjoy some food and drink with us, and we again thank you for your participation.